Now, one person we did hear from today for the first time, Karen Reed herself, doubling down, of course, saying she did not do this. She wants to know who did.
Said it feels we're the only ones fighting for the truth of what happened to John O'Keefe. And me and my family and my attorneys and my team have marshaled every resource to get to the truth. It just feels like no one else wants it.
Karen, just to be clear, you didn't do it.
We know who did it, Steve. We know. And we know who spearheaded this cover-up. You all know.
Yes, we do.
And no, she didn't do it. No, she didn't do it. This is an innocent woman. She didn't do it.
I tried to save his life.
Yeah.
I tried to save his life at 6 in the morning. I was covered in the only one trying to save his life.
Why'd you admit to it?
She didn't admit to it. She didn't admit to anything close to that. Nothing close to that. And you should know that.
That was like 3 or 4 times she admitted to it.
No, she didn't.
That's not true.
She asked a question. She asked a question, which is very different. She didn't admit to anything.
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record. Okay. How is everybody? Welcome to the Bad News True Crime Channel. Welcome to the Nothing Going Right. I have bad news to tell you, True Crime Channel. That's what I feel like, at least as far as Karen Reed's concerned, this channel is becoming a little bit. Hi, Kimmy K. Hey, Jude. Tammie, nice to see everybody. Chris. So, Aidan Carney has just done an interview with a juror. I have a lot to say about that. It's a very long interview. I'm going to try to cover it possibly tomorrow. Usually my day of rest, but it kind of just already took 2 days. So I think I'll be on tomorrow talking about that interview. There's a lot to talk about. I've seen a lot of these. All I have to say, just in short, there's a lot to say about different aspects of that interview, but just in short, this is not uncommon to see jurors come out after a verdict, with an innocence fraud campaign, and say, we really meant to do this or that, or I really wanted to, but something, uncouth happened, not uncouth, unlawful. We didn't understand. We were rushed. This is not unusual, at least on my side of the fence. I've seen a lot of these jurors strangely have the same opinion as the innocence fraud campaign that's storming or sweeping through the area. So I'll leave it at that but I'll probably be talking about that. I will be talking about that tomorrow. Not probably, definitely. And Tuesday, we have another hearing in the Karen Reed case. And I hope to live stream that I believe it starts in the afternoon, or early afternoon, like 11. Or is that late morning? I guess that's late morning. What I really wanted to talk about today is intent. And it really pulls into why I feel that so many people on the non-supporter side of the Karen Reed case are really not doing John O'Keefe's family any favors or helping change public opinion when it comes to Karen Reed's guilt. And because there was alcohol involved, There is plausible deniability. Maybe she was blackout drunk, but we know she wasn't blackout drunk because we know that she remembers so much of what happened that night. According to her interviews, her latest interviews, YouTube, the wind was howling, the howling wind she remembers. She remembers turning up U2 on the car stereo. She told her father she felt she hit something. She told many first responders, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. This is all my fault. I hit him. And of course, there's the issue that I always talk about, but I want to go over one more time, which is, of course, her infotainment system and the movements of her car. So what do we talk about when we talk about intent, and why is Karen Read charged with second-degree murder in this case? So in Massachusetts, second-degree murder, the law is when a person kills someone, regardless of intent or other details surrounding the incident, it's generally called a homicide. Specifically, murder is when a person knowingly and purposefully kills another person. So intent is very important in this case to distinguish it from an accidental hitting. And what the Commonwealth intended to prove first time round, fortunately, wasn't solidified. We had a hung jury. Was that Karen Read knew by hitting John O'Keefe with her rather large SUV, by clipping him. And when you say hitting, it sounds like she hit him full on. No, she clipped him. And we know from her movements of her car that she went in reverse with her foot 75% down on the gas pedal. That's as close to flooring it as you're going to get. 24 miles an hour in reverse, never once touching the brake. So after you hit something, the idea is that you touch the brake. Because she clipped John and achieved it, she didn't have to hit the brake. She, right? She knew, she just moved the car into, right? She went right straight back, never once touching her brake, never saying, hold on, am I hitting her? Her infotainment system was telling her she was gonna hit something, and she didn't touch the brake until after she hit him. Switched into another gear and drove away and left him in that condition to, as she says, teach him a lesson. That was the plan. At a minimum, teach John a lesson. And my theory is that John O'Keefe had finally said he had enough. And you can read their text messages. I've been over that in an episode. Go back and listen if you aren't familiar with all the text messages between Karen and John O'Keefe. John O'Keefe was really managing Karen quite well. So what is it when we talk about second degree? Why is she charged with second degree? When a person knowingly and purposefully kills another person or causes substantial bodily harm that the person later dies due to the injuries that were inflicted. So Karen Read had to know by leaving John O'Keefe, her boyfriend of 2 years who never wore a coat, and that was something she couldn't have missed. Every single person who testified when they were asked, did John O'Keefe wear a coat? Oh, everyone knew this about John O'Keefe. He didn't wear a coat. So as your boyfriend, you have to be thinking, wow, it would be really bad if you were, say, caught in a nor'easter, unconscious. You could really do some serious damage or death. And that is what Karen Read intended to cause. So when a person killed someone, regardless of intent surrounding, it's generally called a homicide. In the Commonwealth, a person commits a second-degree murder when he or she intentionally kills another person, but does so without any premeditation. So premeditation, and I disagree with this. I just don't think that they could prove a first degree on this. But I think she was fantasizing about doing something like this. And things were going very south, but premeditation could be seconds, minutes, doesn't have to be hours, days. But I would say the time that it took to put her car in reverse was the premeditation, but okay. The killing must be done with a malice of forethought. These sorts of killings occur in the heat of the moment, but do not involve any premeditation on the part of the perpetrator. At the moment the murder occurs, the killer definitely intends to kill the victim, but up to that moment, the killer had no intent or plan to commit murder. So examples of second degree. Let's say Betty goes to visit her husband Don at the Madison Avenue office one day, finds him sleeping with his secretary, Megan. If Betty kills Megan in the heat of passion, that's second degree murder. Why? Betty didn't have any plan to kill Megan when she went to Don's office that day, so there was no premeditation. So I would say that this is at the time of the murder, however, Betty fully intends, I'll finish my thought in a second. Betty fully intended to kill Megan because of her anger over the affair. So there was malice of forethought. Second degree is also when a person commits a felony and a death occurs. This is often referred to as a felony murder. For a charge of felony murder, the prosecutor doesn't need to prove that the killing was intentional, but merely a consequence of committing some other felony. For example, if a person steals a car and runs into a pedestrian over in the process, that's felony. Okay? So they didn't give her first degree, though I would say that is an advantage of killing someone with your car. And it's the way that Karen Read does everything. Always with one person removed from her, one step away. Do you know what I'm saying? So the car, you can always say it was an accident. She didn't mean to do it. You can't say, it's something that you need every day. You can't say if she brought a gun with her to 34 Fairview, and John O'Keefe broke up with her, and she chose that moment, then they would charge her with first degree because she brought her gun. But she had to bring her car to get to 34 Fairview. So I would say Karen Read has the advantage there of the second degree charge. Second degree and first degree often carry very hefty penalties. And I think also what we're seeing is a general lack of, I think there's a resistance in the public to want to punish someone. And when the O'Keefe family isn't talking as a family, and Karen Read has done such a good job of putting herself as the victim in the public eye, and is giving interview after interview after interview, it's easy for the public to see Karen Read as really the victim of the Commonwealth. And John O'Keefe has been totally obscured and forgotten. So let's look at her infotainment system. This is something that Innocence Fraud Watch put up on her Twitter. And I've played for you the sound before, but this is an entire demonstration of how the infotainment system works. And I think it paints a better portrait of what Karen Read's car would have looked like that night. So here we go. I hope everybody can see. Yep. Okay. So this is Karen Reed's Lexus. You have the infotainment system on the right here, the screen. If you're listening on podcast, all I can say is we're looking at the inside of a Lexus, and there's a screen that gives you multiple views of the surrounding areas surrounding your car.
Me too. It's warm in here.
Oh, I thought it was me.
No, it's not you. It's warm in here. And I'm sure
So here we go.
the intensity's a little high for you.
Does this one have the intelligent collision?
It does. Well, let's not demo it, though.
Oh, I want
There
to
it
demo
is.
it. I want to demo it. I want to demo it.
And
Are you sure?
Do you see how it's getting louder and flashing, louder and louder and louder? You just can't miss this. If you know that if you're a driver, you're intimately familiar with your car. You're not going to miss this beeping and flashing.
yeah.
You
I would-
sure?
No.
Okay. I'm going to pull.
How does YouTube, the band, or any loud rock music cover up that sound? Let me just play you that sound near the end. So it gets more intense, louder, and that sonic frequency, I would say, is near impossible to overcome with music. Let's listen again.
Demo it. Are
And
you sure?
yeah.
You
I would-
sure?
No.
Okay. I'm going to pull. Okay.
Me too. It's warm in here.
Oh, I thought it was me.
No, it's not you. It's warm in here. And I'm sure
Do we really need the back and forth on the heat in the car? Do we need that?
So here we go.
the intensity's a little high for you.
Does this one have the intelligent collision?
It does.
sonar?
Well, let's not demo it, though.
Oh, I want
There it is.
Do you see how there's a red line? It tells you that's, I guess, the wall that they're hitting, or a car. But they're just telling you that you're going to hit something. You're going to hit something. It's akin to someone screaming in your ear. You're going to hit someone. You're going to hit someone. You're going to hit something. You're going to hit something. You're going to hit him. And Karen Reed, we know, jerked her car so she would clip John O'Keefe with her car. She's aiming at something. You can't say when you have a car like this that you're not aiming to hit something. The other explanation is she's so drugged, she doesn't care, she doesn't know. Then why is she telling everyone he's dead and he was hit by a plow? So this also goes into how we know Karen Reed was in an accident. She had knowledge of the crime that no one else did. She was never surprised. She acted hysterical. She put on her act. But I wouldn't say that's the same as being surprised. She knew right where to find him in the snow. No one else saw anything. She knew right where to find him. And she started kicking the door. Let me out, let me out, let me out. Well, that proves intent. We know it's not an accident. Hey, Rena. She was not listening to YouTube. I don't think so either, Rena, but I'm just saying she's such a liar. I'm just saying, even if she were, that sound would surpass it. I think that's something she added. She was way too busy arguing with John. She is lying about that. Well, she could argue, let's say, Rena, thinking about Karen Reed, because she's such a proficient liar. She would say, well, after John got out, I turned up U2 on the stereo. None of this, we never heard these details about the howling winds and U2 until people like me started. I'm not saying I did it, but until it became part of the general discussion. And Karen Reed says she Googles herself every morning on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, etc., Facebook, that Karen Reed could not have missed her infotainment system and the beeping and flashing. Then she started adding in details like U2 and the howling winds as a reason why she didn't hear it. But I would argue, Rena, and thank you very much, that kind of very loud, high noise. You could hear, and it's pitched that way so that should you be listening to loud music, you still can hear it. Or if there's a lot of noise or activity or howling winds, that kind of sound will bleed through the howling winds. We also know, because Karen Reed went right back to 34 Fairview, she knew right where to find John. And if you didn't think something, it's not normal, and I think this has been brought up before, for your first thought to think that he got hit by a plow. An innocent person would say, well, maybe he slept over at the Alberts because of the nor'easter. Maybe he couldn't catch a ride home and he crashed out there. First place you would call would be try to go over to 34 Fairview and knock on the door and say, is John here? And that's an innocent person would do. And why didn't she, instead of having Kaylee and involving all these other people, say, let's go find John. Kaylee, let's go find your uncle. Let's go. Why wouldn't she just retrace their steps for something you lost, right? But the first place you would look when you're trying to find anything is the last place. It's not normal to go, there he is in the snow when no one else can see him. That's not usual. No, neither Carrie Roberts or Jennifer McCabe saw anything. But Karen Reed knows because she knows the last place. She remembers everything. She wasn't that drunk. I argue she's a habitual drinker. And it didn't touch the sides. She had a hollow leg. No one that morning, even police officers are trained to spot drunkenness, didn't say she was that drunk. But I feel like, and why I said in the beginning of this episode that welcome to the Bad News Channel, I feel like we're in a very bad position. Things can switch and change. But right now, Karen Reed has been one step ahead. And I think we're going to get another hung jury at trial. And I think that if they go with she was so jealous, I don't think this was about jealousy. I think this was the final discard. You don't discard me, I discard you. No one leaves me. Her narcissistic, psychopathic personality could not handle the rejection of a breakup and needed to punish John O'Keefe for the crime of leaving her. Hey, Dean Walker, thanks so much. And I think that anyone, it's pretty obvious, who spearheads an innocence fraud campaign that targets the witnesses who sadly were just close to John O'Keefe and had no other, have just been, who are just bystanders in this for no fault of their own, and targets John O'Keefe's family, grieving family, and spearheads a harassment campaign against them, is heartless and cruel in order to save themselves. That is not something that an innocent person would do. An innocent person would say, I don't want to falsely accuse anyone else. They would have to be certain before they accuse someone else of murder, having been accused themselves of such a crime wrongly. They must know how badly it feels to be falsely accused. They wouldn't go around falsely accusing other people and then going, you know what? Never mind. We don't know who did it. It's we're not detectives. You thought we should figure out who did this? That's not our job. Commonwealth didn't prove their case. We don't know who did it. What are we, Sherlock Holmes here? But it's absurd. The arguments I hear that Karen Reed, pieces of writing, Karen Reed was just piecing together what happened. She couldn't fully remember because she was so blackout drunk. She knew exactly what happened. She wasn't concerned. She wasn't confused, excuse me. She wasn't confused. She wanted to mix it up. And when she said, I hit him, she slipped. She had a moment where she thought she would take responsibility, and call it an accident. And that looked like it would be her first defense. But then they had other ideas. Blame a plow driver, blame the Alberts. Now just blame we don't know who. Anyone but Karen Reed. That's where her defense is going. Even with all that, people on this side of the fence are still saying, like, what? We don't know. We couldn't know what Karen Reed's intent was. And this is something that Adam Lally, I thought he did a terrible opening and a pretty bad closing. I don't think that's his forte. What you do in closing is it's your time to put the pieces of evidence together and argue. Hold on 1 second, guys. Thank you. Thanks for holding on. So instead of putting the pieces of evidence together and making an argument as to why it all proves the way I guess I just argued to you guys today, and showing the evidence again and going over her car data. She was there. John O'Keefe was there. It proves John O'Keefe never went into the home. No one else could have done it but Karen Reed. Her car shows the movements of hitting something. Nothing else was shown damaged in front of 34 Fairview but John O'Keefe. I hate to, there's no damaged property. Karen Reed could not have done it in her Ring camera video that she made her own evidence by love tapping. The damage to her smashed to smithereens taillight could not have been done by Karen Reed in the early morning hours of January 29th. Love tapping John O'Keefe's car. That was his time to argue. Instead, he just reviewed. It was like a review for a test, all the evidence. And he asked the jury to put 8 weeks of Commonwealth evidence together and say what it meant, instead of making a really passionate argument as to why she was guilty. I think Hank Brennan might do a little bit better with that. But is he going to bring up the plumber? Is he going to bring up Karen Reed's behavior? Because Karen Reed's behavior is so central to, in my view, to this case. So, Innocence Fraud blog, Watch, did a good blog. Wanted to read it. I know I've already talked about Kate Peter before. Let's just review really quickly. She made this video talking about Karen Reed. Let's take a look.
My take on this is that it sounds like it was a tragic fucking accident fueled by emotions and alcohol, which, like, I think is relatable to a lot of people. I know it's relatable to me because it could be anyone, who hasn't had too much to drink and argued with a boyfriend, who hasn't, these are things that are relatable. And she's white and she's attractive and she's they're going to say, oh, she's not wealthy. They're estimating that she spent anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000 on her defense. Like, she's wealthy. Like, most people that aren't wealthy can't pull that kind of cash up. You know what I mean? Like, most people don't have assets to cover that. Even that's a privilege in and of itself. So we see this woman that doesn't look like a criminal, right? Doing something that's relatable.
Okay. Well, how is this relatable? Every one of my boyfriends I've argued with has lived. I don't find it relatable to hit my boyfriend after an argument with my car and leave him to die. But okay. And what does a criminal look like?
Allegedly. Right. And people are rushing to her defense. I believe that if she was somebody else, maybe this wouldn't be happening. If she was a white trash lady like me that would just get the public defender and take accountability. But it's just to me that, there's enough evidence that she hit and killed this guy that even she said it herself. She admitted to it. And she is fully willing to have her defense team throw complete strangers, including an 18-year-old boy, under the bus to...
Now she's including a minor. But it was also Kate Peter who threw out the idea that Colin Albert, as a way to troll Aiden Turtle Boy, Carney, was dealing drugs. So she didn't mind involving a kid in this. She knew what that rumor would do, and that rumor is still hanging around to this day.
Save her own skin and try to keep herself out of prison. And maybe it'll work. All I can really say is that, you get found not guilty, you never get found innocent, right? And this is, again, she's being championed by Aiden Carney, who in every other incident, the police report is there's no need for a trial. He'll pull someone's police report. You're just guilty. You're a criminal, right? Not with her, and I'm not saying, I'm not going to call her a criminal. She hasn't been convicted yet. I'm not going to call her a murderer because I don't believe that it was her. I believe it was an accident, but I believe that
it was an accident. How? You saying Karen Reed didn't know what she was doing that night? She did it by accident? Then why was her first story got hit by a plow? Why did she tell her father, I felt? That's an experiential memory. And then he knew immediately that he messed up and changed his language. She felt she hit something. That's an experiential memory. You literally feel it through your car when you hit something. The reverberations go through your body, through the car, through your body when you hit something. She felt she hit something. Why didn't she get out and check? Why didn't she get out and check? She could have saved his life. Because the plan at a minimum was to teach John a lesson. Why won't Kate call her a murderer? But she doesn't explain why she thinks it's an accident. And I still haven't heard any explanation. And certainly I've heard behind the scenes that Kate Peter thinks this is the case that's going to make her famous. And she desperately wants to be famous. So everybody brings their own needs to this. And to this case, she has a need to be famous, and certainly that's a much more palatable position to have when there's a giant innocence fraud campaign. Oh, she did it, but she didn't mean to. She didn't mean any harm. Poor Karen Reed didn't mean anything bad by hitting him with her rather large SUV. And did she not mean to spearhead a witness harassment campaign? Because certainly everything that Karen Reed does is strategic. She also can be impulsive. A little bit of anomaly there.
But it did happen. And
yeah, but it did happen. She doesn't think that John O'Keefe is living somewhere under a different name and say, is that what she means by it did happen? say on an island somewhere with a different name, Mexico somewhere. And he and Karen Reed faked his death. Is that what you're saying? It did happen?
I believe that, you know, I think it's a tough one. I would like to say that if I was in the same situation and I did actually hit and kill someone with my car, that I would argue that there was no intent, because there wouldn't have been, and that I would ask for leniency and the punishment that I deserve. I would like to think that I would not throw strangers or anyone under the bus to try to save my own hide. I don't know, though, because I've never faced down that much jail time, prison time.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I feel about that. About that clip. And it's so easy because John O'Keefe isn't here to speak for himself, to put ourselves in Karen Reed's spot, because Karen Reed's doing so many interviews. What if I were Karen Reed? What if you were John O'Keefe? And because the O'Keefe family isn't speaking out as a family, and we've only had really one or two interviews with Paul O'Keefe that are short. And my understanding is that they've all signed on to contracts with Gretchen Voss's Netflix program where they can't give interviews. It's harder for people to imagine being John O'Keefe, and much easier to imagine being Karen Reed and facing a lot of time. And so we see a lot of, how do I put this? Misplaced sympathy towards Karen Reed, if you put your own face on Karen Reed. Because how many people would spearhead a witness harassment campaign, and a campaign that harasses the victim's family? I hope not a lot. I hope we haven't gotten to a culture where a lot of us would do that. So let me just show you. So one of the things that Kate put up was the Justice for John O'Keefe website. And the Innocence Fraud Watch blog, here it is. Link is in the description of this episode. Did a really thoughtful blog on the elements of the elements of that case. So last time I was talking, or the time before last, I was talking about the O'Keefe family and encouraging them to speak as a family. And I was showing a campaign that I was part of for Justice for Paul Howe, and how the family had put together a really excellent website and did interviews as a family, and how effective it was. In Oklahoma, here we have the Justice for John O'Keefe website, and it's riddled with errors. So here, let me just read you some of this. Why does Kate Peter, aka Masshole Troll Mafia, why does Kate Peters' Justice for John O'Keefe's website contain misinformation if alleged mission is to rectify? Excuse me, let me try that again. Why does Kate Peters' Justice for John O'Keefe website contain misinformation if alleged mission is to rectify the falsehoods? So here's Mama Llama. It's Carrie Llama says on Twitter, she did it. This is John's website if you want information about the case. And Innocence Fraud Watch points out it's not John's website. Kate Peter, aka Masshole Troll Mafia, and her numerous other unnamed alias sock puppet accounts. I personally think that, my take on this is that it sounds like it was a tragic effing accident fueled by emotions and alcohol, which I think is relatable to a lot of people. I know it's relatable to me because it could be anyone, and John O'Keefe could be anyone, who hasn't had too much to drink and argued with a boyfriend? I just can't get over that. I can't get over that whole clip. Who hasn't just clipped someone with a rather large SUV and left them to die in a nor'easter after having too much to drink? Yeah, every one of my boyfriends has lived after having an argument with me. Kate Peter, aka Masshole Mafia, has brazenly stated on X, "In this case, I know a little bit more than you." Yet on the Justice for John O'Keefe evidence section of her website, which was seemingly launched on around July 19, 2024, under the header, "The Evidence Against Karen Reed," Carrie Roberts' testimony has been embellished. Why? The website also disingenuously states under the header, "Reliable Publications," our team has reviewed and substantiated various sources that provide a comprehensive understanding of the Commonwealth versus Karen Reed through the examination of evidence. Each source was chosen for its relevance and credibility. Sources include blogs, interviews, news articles, court documents, and reliable online resources offering a rational and insightful analysis. Most importantly, these sources cite supporting evidence and explanations that unfold the truth. Although the above may read or sound convincing to the uninitiated of how some people choose to use words to manipulate, as it is a complete and utter fabrication. Here's a tweet from Kate saying, "You are in a cult, therefore you are unable to look at it objectively. Hope that helps." And contrary to what Kate Peter states in the above, some of us can see through her and Kevin Lenahan's deceit. For example, under a section here which reads, "Evidence not disputed by Kevin Lenahan, Yellow Cottage Tales," it states, "The defense never challenged Carrie Roberts' testimony where Karen called her and said John's dead and he'd been hit by a plow. That was at 5 a.m., more than an hour before John." According to Carrie Roberts' testimony, she said that Karen Reed called her at 5 a.m. on the dot and stated, "John's dead. Carrie, Carrie, Carrie." So here's another thing when we talk about intent and how did she know that John was dead? How did she know something happened to him? So she's showing knowledge of her crime. And if she hadn't visited the scene before then and didn't know that he was deceased, then she had to know that her hitting him with her car was enough to cause serious bodily injury and or death. Carrie Roberts' testimony was that Karen Reed then hung up. There was no mention of a plow at 5 a.m. To date, it is not yet known to the public nor the first jury at what time Carrie Roberts spoke to Karen Reed for a second time after the 5 a.m. on the dot call. Dishonest, unreliable, irrational, and illogical. Under the Justice for John O'Keefe website, header, "Our mission." As a grassroots organization, our mission is to rectify the falsehoods propagated by the Free Karen Reed movement and media alike. Yet again under the header here, "The Evidence Against Karen Reed," and link-headed, "The Intent," which reads, "Timeline for malicious content," it states of Karen Reed, 12:33, Karen Reed calls John. No answer. She calls repeatedly, driving home. Why would John O'Keefe answer his phone after Karen Reed had not long before reversed into him with her SUV and left him mortally injured, laying on the ground where she last saw him? And Karen Reed did not drive home. She chose to drive to John O'Keefe's house on Meadows Avenue and behaved like a burglar. And importantly, she went on to tell Carrie Roberts, and Jen McCabe less than 5 hours later that she was not supposed to stay in Canton last night. So this is a really important point, that she went into John O'Keefe's home because she knew his permission no longer mattered. He wasn't going to come home and kick her out. She snuck into his home, thought up her plan, didn't sleep, in my opinion. That's my theory. Plotted out all the people she was going to involve in her plan to put blame on. So Jennifer McCabe, she immediately went after the Cameranos because she didn't like them. Jen McCabe, Carrie Roberts, all the people she wanted to create chaos, deflect blame, and get away with her crime. So she plotted out a plan pretty early on to get away with this, in my opinion. And importantly, she went on to tell Carrie Roberts and Jennifer McCabe less than 5 hours later that she was not supposed to stay in Canton last night, which is also crucial evidence in this case. Will Jennifer McCabe and Carrie Roberts tell second jury how Mansfield murderer, that's Karen Reed, I love the Innocence Fraud Watch is calling her the Mansfield murderer. Okay, will Jennifer McCabe and Carrie Roberts tell second jury how Mansfield murderer duped them and pretended to have memory loss? Karen Reed also stated in a text message to John O'Keefe at around 6:35 p.m., less than 4 hours earlier, referring to her home in Mansfield, "Maybe I'll come back late tonight. Bad snow is in the early a.m." Karen Reed had given John O'Keefe the impression in her last stream of text messages to him before she had arrived at C.F. McCarthy's pub that Richie, her plumber, who she said she had used before, was seemingly due to return to her Mansfield home to sort the piece that was all rusted. So he was going to fix her rusted part of her plumbing for her hot water issues and resolve her alleged plumbing issues the following day, meaning January 29, 2022. The timeline also states of Karen Reed at 9:42, she brings the SUV into the garage. In reality, it's not known at what time exactly Karen Reed drove her SUV into John O'Keefe's garage. This around 12:42 a.m. timing is from 12:41:35 timestamp voicemail call Karen Reed left on John O'Keefe's phone, in which it sounded like she was in John's garage. During this voicemail, the sound of high-pitched beeping from Karen Reed's auditory cues of her SUV can be heard. That's how we know it was working, by the way. Followed by a sound of the door shutting, car door, then footsteps. So that's from her auditory, from her infotainment system. And then footsteps, and again, another door shutting, which could be the mudroom or the kitchen door. Karen Reed's cell phone had connected to John O'Keefe's Wi-Fi at around 6:36 a.m. Therefore, she could have driven her SUV into John's garage earlier than 12:41:35 a.m. John O'Keefe's phone had also received a 12:37:09 timestamp voicemail call from Karen Reed not long after her phone had connected to John's Wi-Fi at around 12:36 a.m. stating, "John, I effing hate you." Effing is my words, not Karen's. But what was she doing during these unaccounted for approximately 4 minutes in between? And why did Karen Reed choose to delete the Ring camera recording of her arrival at John O'Keefe's home? Kevin Lenahan's timeline also states of Karen Reed, 1:10, she calls her parents. The evidence is that Karen Reed called her mother 4 minutes later at around 1:14, not 1:10 a.m. At 1:10 a.m., Karen Reed called John O'Keefe's phone, then hung up. She then called John's phone back at 1:10 and left a voicemail stating, yes, it's 1 a.m. I can't even do her accent. I'm with your effing niece and nephew. You effing pervert. You're a fucking pervert. Oh, those calls are so horrible. Aren't they awful? It states at 1:18 a.m. that Karen Reed accuses John of cheating on her, immediately followed by, then something changes. It's like always the writer, then something changes. 1:18, last in the string of messages, accuses John of cheating on her. Then something changes. The timestamp on the Celebrate Extraction report was 1:17:39, not 1:18, and what Karen Reed actually stated was a whole lot more than accusing John of cheating. Below is a transcribe of what she stated in this voicemail. Note how Karen Reed again, twice, mentions going home. John, I'm going home. I cannot babysit your niece. I need to go home. You are fucking using me right now. You are effing another girl. My words, not hers. I mean, the effing part. Just gonna watch my language. Kaylee sleeping next to me. You're an effing loser. F yourself. Karen Reed had asked John O'Keefe less than 11 hours earlier if he was interested in someone else. At around 2:25 p.m. the previous day, she had texted John, tell me if you're interested in someone else. Can't think of any other reason you've been like this, to which John had replied, nope. Kevin Lenahan's timeline also admits to include the fact that Karen Reed had previously sent a text message to John O'Keefe's phone, timestamped at 12:55:31 a.m., stating, I'm going home, followed by see you later, which was timestamped at around 19 seconds later. Around 4 minutes after this, at around 12:59, Karen had left John's voicemail another message stating, John, I'm here with your effing kids. Nobody knows where the F you are, you effing pervert. Less than 3 minutes later, she had texted John O'Keefe's phone, your kids are cucking alone, followed by another text reading, I'm back in Mansfield. The kids are home alone. Just over 2 minutes later. Kevin Lenahan's timeline also states that Karen Reed woke up John O'Keefe's niece screaming in the hallway at 4:42. 4:42, calls parents, answered, wakes up screaming niece in hallway. Wakes up niece screaming in hallway that something's happened to John. This is not what the evidence suggests happened. According to John O'Keefe's niece, she was awoken at approximately 4:30 a.m. and that Karen Reed shook her and that she said her name, then left her room. On January 29th, at approximately 4:30, Defendant Reed knew that she hit JJ with her SUV. Nonetheless, she woke up JJ's 14-year-old niece, Kaylee, and talked about JJ's death, talked about hitting JJ with her SUV, and otherwise involved Kaylee in her frantic calls about JJ's death. And the first call to Jennifer McCabe's phone was at 4:53, not 5 minutes later at 4:58. So here's the timeline on the website for 4:58. So when you're trying to convince, say, a free Karen Reed person, all these times are really important so that you're giving out reliable information that can be trusted. And it was John O'Keefe's niece who initially spoke to Jennifer McCabe. I'm going to take a quick break. When I get back, we're going to finish this. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back after in a minute. See you in a minute.
We don't take a break. Grab a snack or maybe a glass of wine. Roberta will be back in no time. This podcast is listener supported, so smash that like button and subscribe or become a patron for exclusive content if you are so inclined. Have something to say? Shoot Roberta a super chat. She will do her best to read it on air without delay. Now Roberta's back and ready to put the true back in true crime. Here's Roberta.
Okay, we're back. We're going over Innocence Fraud Watch's blog, looking at the Justice for John O'Keefe website critically. As I feel we're heading into another hung jury or an acquittal for Karen Reed. With such an effective innocence fraud campaign for Karen Reed and such an ineffective opposition campaign. And it was John O'Keefe's niece who initially spoke to Jennifer McCabe. A logical and irrational timeline. Kevin Lenahan's illogical and irrational timeline for malicious content misses out a crucial fact of this case, which is that Karen Reed called the Cameranos before calling anyone else other than her parents and John O'Keefe's phone, before she instructed John's niece to call her uncle's phone and then Jennifer McCabe. The time of Karen Reed's bunch of calls to Michael Camerano are not in the public domain, but Michael testified to having woken up at around 5:30 to 6 a.m. to several missed calls from Karen Reed. Karen Reed had called Catherine Camerano at around 4:49 shouting, "Where's Mike?" repeatedly, but she knew Michael Camerano had left C.F. McCarthy's early because his son had been hit in the face with a hockey stick and had lost a tooth. Therefore, he had not gone into the Waterfall Bar with John and Karen. Karen Reed made this call to Catherine Camerano along with her calls to Michael Camerano as part of her manipulative, gaslighting, and blame-shifting plan as she continued to attempt to cover up her murderous crimes and go on to pretend to Jennifer McCabe seconds later after speaking with Catherine that she had left John O'Keefe at the Waterfall Bar after she said they had gotten into an argument. I don't believe they were saying I wasn't in my right mind, Karen Reed said on Nightline. Or are Kevin Lenahan and Kate Peter claiming Karen Reed was blackout drunk and couldn't remember the events or some events at around 4:30, just a few hours before. But she apparently remembered the howling wind and blasting U2 on the stereo when she made up her tale about John O'Keefe going to the door of 34 Fairview and how she claimed she then texted and called him, even though her first ever communication with John's phone following this time was around 12:33:36. Karen says they pulled up to the house and she waited in her SUV. While John went to check things out, she says she watched him go to the door, put his head inside, then nothing. I texted him, I called him, and within minutes of him exiting my car, he's not answering my phone. Minutes, it was howling wind. I had YouTube blasting on the stereo, and I thought, did he somehow try to flag me down? Which was the reaction I was hoping to garner as I slowly pulled away from the house. Did he come out and maybe trip or bend over to pick up his cell phone? And I ran over his foot, and then I passed out drunk. I mean, I didn't think I hit him, but could I have clipped him? Could I have tagged him in the knee and incapacitated him? He didn't look mortally wounded as far as I could see, but could I have done something that knocked him out and in his drunkenness and in the cold didn't come to again? What happens next? Dennis Murphy asks. I left. Then I left, the Karen Reed story. The evidence suggests Karen Reed's SUV was on Fairview Road in the area of the flagpole and fire hydrant on the edge of the lawn of 34 at 12:24:40 and 12:32:16. In the time the Apple Health data suggests this was the time John O'Keefe's phone last moved. Apparently, being around the wrong people was chief among precursor. You can read that. That's an excellent blog to why Mansfield murderer chose to reverse into Boston police officer John O'Keefe with her SUV and left him mortally injured to die in a blizzard. The timeline also states at 5 o'clock, Karen Reed calls Carrie Roberts, John's dead, hit by a plow. This is not what Carrie Roberts testified to. Again, according to Carrie Roberts' testimony, there is no mention by Karen Reed of John O'Keefe having been hit by a plow at 5 o'clock. And again, the exact time of what Carrie Roberts spoke to Karen Reed for a second time was not told to the first jury during Karen Reed's 2024 trial for her murder. Referring to the 5:08 a.m., it states that she searched for John and she was seen headed towards Fairview. Did Karen Reed leave One Meadows Avenue at around 5:08 a.m. to search for John O'Keefe? Or did she pretend? I think, well, I know my preference here. Did she pretend to search for John O'Keefe? And what time was Karen Reed seen headed towards Fairview? Phone records, Lieutenant Brian Tully of Massachusetts State Police examined the records and was able to plot the defendant's movement. While the phone was in use for various periods of time, the phone movements coincided with the directions of travel of the black SUV observed on the video from the library and the temple, both during the time frames. These videos and phone records on the morning of January 29th occur after the defendant spoke with Ms. McCabe on the phone after directing the victim's niece to call Ms. McCabe, and after the defendant is seen on the victim's residence ring video leaving the home at 5:08 a.m. Furthermore, they evince the defendant traveling in the direction of the home on Fairview prior to going to Ms. McCabe's home that morning. In reality, Karen Reed was, so that's the source, that's the actual source. So to go back, they're saying at 5:08 a.m. she searches for John, seen headed towards Fairview. In reality, Karen was first caught on surveillance camera headed towards the Waterfall Bar area. Ergo, she did not drive towards Fairview. This is another crucial fact of this case that should not be misconstrued. At around 5:11 a.m., Karen Reed's black SUV was caught on library surveillance camera, traveling down Sherman Street, then taking a left onto Washington, and traveling the direction of C.F. McCarthy's and the Waterfall Bar. Then at around 5:50, Karen Reed and her SUV were caught on a library surveillance camera traveling away from the area of C.F. McCarthy's and the Waterfall Bar on Washington Street towards Temple Beth Abraham. The library surveillance camera caught Karen's SUV traveling by the front of the building towards the intersection of Washington and Denham Street. These events caught on camera occurred before Karen Reed was heading towards Fairview. It then states that at 5:30 a.m., Karen Reed shows Carrie and Jen her broken taillight. How could have Karen Reed shown Carrie Roberts and Jen McCabe her broken taillight at 5:30 a.m. if she did not arrive at the McCabe's house until after 5:30 a.m.? It states that at 6:05 a.m., they find John clinging to life. How was John O'Keefe clinging to life at 6:05 a.m. if he was described as astole? And this 6:05 timing is illogical, given the fact Jennifer McCabe had called 911 at around 6:03 a.m. Also, witness Jennifer McCabe did not appear to think John O'Keefe was clinging to life. Neither did Karen Reed. At around 6:07 a.m., Jennifer McCabe stated of John O'Keefe on the 911 call, "I think he's dead." And at around 6:05:50, she stated, "He doesn't appear to be breathing." Followed by, at around 6:05:56, "I guess he's gone." And at around 6:06:06, Jennifer McCabe also stated, "I think he's passed away." At 6:09:16, Sergeant Seroff stated that Karen Reed had said, "He's dead." At around 6:10, firefighter and paramedic Matthew Kelly said that Karen Reed had stated, "He's dead. He's effing dead." Karen Reed also stated to her father, William Reed, in a text message at around 6:31 a.m., "John is dead." At around 6:34 a.m., Karen Reed stated to Catherine Camerano in another text message, "He's dead." At around 6:50, Aaron O'Keefe heard Karen Reed shout over the phone, "John's dead." And at around 7 a.m., Karen Reed's father, William Reed, had called 911 asking for a ride to Good Samaritan Hospital in Brockton from Dighton, and had told them his daughter's boyfriend had passed away. At around 7:05, Karen Reed stated to the paramedics, referring to around 6:03 a.m., that she had found John O'Keefe frozen dead in the snow, and that her and John had an argument earlier in the night. If, as Kate Peter and her team's website states, our commitment is to uphold truth and honor John's memory remains steadfast, would it be a good place to start by following and sticking to the actual factual evidence of the case, and not publish or link to misinformation and falsehoods? And to also not allow your varying biases and personal agendas, or varying biases and personal agendas of others, to cloud judgment and appear narrow-minded and dishonest and not open to considering avenues of valid reason and logic? And would it also be a good idea to lend your full support to victim survivor Lindsay Gattani, given the fact that the Justice for John O'Keefe website states here, Aidan Carney is charged with 8 counts of witness intimidation, 3 counts of conspiracy, to intimidate witnesses, and 5 counts of picketing a witness. The Massachusetts State Police continue to work tirelessly to investigate the ongoing harassment perpetuated by Free Karen Read supporters. Isn't Lindsay Gattani involved in this case? So also, I got sent, I don't talk about the Yellow Cottage Tales because last time I disagreed with Kevin. He made a slander video. He just slandered my good name and didn't really address any of my issues of disagreement with him. He just went after me personally. So this isn't a personal attack. This is these are some questions I have for Kevin. Got sent his video, his latest video. I think he has a new one coming out today, where he's prepared a script and is announcing his new Karen Read book. Hey, Tammie, thanks so much for your favorite, I know, thanks to favorite soda drink fund. I am obsessed with this Schweppes black cherry seltzer. It's not really soda. It just has like the hint of the smell of black cherry. I think that's how they do it. It's just seltzer. I'm going through crazy amount of that Schweppes black cherry seltzer. If only I could get, Tammie, if only I could get a sponsorship. I love that stuff. Anybody else drink that? It's so good. I am going through can after can. Anyway, so Kevin says we can't understand Karen Read's mind. So in this video, I was really shocked by some of it. I think that's why the person sent it to me. Here, let's take a listen together.
The whirlwind. That's Frederick Douglass. Sometimes I feel like I might be like that reporter covering the twister who gets too close to the shot, if you know what I mean. This was the text that I woke up to on April 8th.
So I sped it up a little bit because it's a little long. So he talks about how he got involved in the case, and he got into it by promoting the Free Karen Read side. He's also promoted various cases of people he thinks are quote unquote wrongfully convicted. So he's intimately, Miss Lisa, are you drinking black cherry seltzer? You love the black cherry Schweppes seltzer? It's so good. It's so good. Black cherry is something I grew up with in Pennsylvania. Is it very New York? So that girl, I love this stuff. I'm going through, like, I get it in the cases. Because like if you don't get it in the can and you get it in the bottle, it goes flat. Got to get it in the can. Get it really icy cold, very bubbly, so your eyes water when you drink it. It's so good. So anyway, so he promoted the Free Karen Read side until I guess he was convinced she was guilty of something. And I think last I heard, he was saying it was an accident. She didn't mean to do it. He was basically supporting acquitting on the second degree. This is the last I heard. I haven't been watching Kevin's channel, but it seems like this is where he is with Kate, that she's overcharged and that it's just a manslaughter charge. She didn't know she hit him. She was too drunk to know what she did, and She had no intent, and we can't know what's in Karen Reed's mind. As if the entire case isn't a really good insight into, and all the interviews she's given, never mind that, don't give us really good insight into Karen Reed. And let's not forget the witness harassment campaign that she's done against the witnesses and the victim's family in this case haven't given us a really good idea of how Karen Reed's mind works. But let's take a listen.
18th, 2023 says this. Take a look at this. Multiple police agencies involved. Biggest story in the country. Similar texts from other law enforcement people came to me that morning, and they all linked to Turtle Boy's story on the case. So, I was like, should I cover this? I called Tom Fleming that morning. I was like, what do you think? And he kind of encouraged me to go forward, but for some reason, I really had hesitation. I'm not even sure why, but I had hesitation. The whirlwind. I feel like we're all in it now. There's a sense of a powerful storm that is heading towards a crescendo, events accelerating, no one sure of the outcome. And not just of the trial, it feels like something utterly unique, as any big historical moment is. And no matter how close anyone is to the...
Wouldn't you love, I'm sure John O'Keefe's family loves to know that their son's murder is now being described as an historical event. Or is the historical event the trial, their son's murder trial? Is that the historical event that we're all going to? Because I think they're going to be disappointed. I think we're headed, at least now it could change. It looks like we're headed right into another hung jury or an acquittal in this case. I cannot see a conviction. I think Karen Reed and her crew have done a really good job of poisoning the jury pool. And it's going to be fascinating to watch if Judge Cannoni puts any kind of limit on protesters and stuff in a bigger range than she did before, because everybody could hear the protesters, is what I heard in the courtroom, and were very aware of their presence. I'm curious to see if they're going to do anything differently. And I think that if they don't do much differently, we're going to get the same result as this trial. And the most important thing is going to be picking the jury. So my impression of that juror was that he was a turtle rider. If he wasn't a turtle rider when he got on the jury, he was looking stuff up. He already says in that interview that he was discussing the case before jury deliberation. So he already had no problem breaking his oath to the court that he wouldn't, every morning they were asked, did you discuss the case? And I guess he just felt comfortable lying to the court, saying he didn't when he did.
The center of the whirlwind, the witnesses, the victim's family, Karen's attorneys. Karen, no one really truly understands what's happening. You feel the powerful destructive forces, but with something like this, you don't truly understand it all until you reach a vantage point, some point a little down the road in the future, where you can look back at things with some perspective. I've been off the air for a couple of weeks because the publisher of the book that's coming out did a 180 again and decided to actually publish it before the trial. Now, I hadn't worked on it since early December when they had changed their mind back then. I was largely done by then, but still a lot of work to do. And the publisher did a 180 back then, and they decided they wanted to wait to publish it till like July. So I stopped working on it. And then when the publisher did this 180 again on a whim, now all of a sudden they wanted it like yesterday. So that was a couple of weeks ago, and I spent about 14 days working 16 hours a day, crazy, just to try to get this thing done. And I stopped all the other work. I had been working hard on a video series on this. Now I'm not even sure if I'm ever going to release that.
So he says he's not writing a free Karen Reed book, and he's not writing an anti-Karen Reed book. So he's writing the fence sitter's guide to the Karen Reed trial, I guess. The Karen Reed story. What's the point if you're going to sit on the fence? What's the point? Because he wants to get the biggest audience, right?
So anyways, it was a really, really long, grueling stretch. And when it was turned in this week, I was physically, mentally, and emotionally drained. Like nothing I'd ever done before in my life, I don't think. I don't know. And I've been drained a lot. So I've been following all the mini develops in the case, though, while this is going on. And we're going to talk about them today. I might need your help to remind me of some of them. That's what you guys are there for. Now, one thing you don't really need reminding of is that I am not an expert on any of this. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a homicide investigator. Certainly not a forensic data analyst. Should I even be sharing my thoughts on any of this at all? Do I have any business doing that? I don't know. I've made some big mistakes covering this case. I've hurt people, and out of my ignorance, and I don't want to do that again. So if I just shut the hell up, mission accomplished, right? Let smarter, more experienced people talk about the case. I don't know. But, I've had a couple of days to start recovering from that grinding process of finishing the book, so I'm not physically exhausted anymore as I speak to you right now. But there is still a feeling of having gotten too close to the whirlwind just so I could get some footage of it, right? Like that reporter, I forget which movie that was about the global warming thing, the end of the world. It was kind of crazy at the end with the wolves or attack. I don't know. It wasn't a bad movie, though. But I think it was based on an old book called The Global Superstorm, The Coming Global Superstorm. But I forget the name of the movie. Anyways, I did miss being here with the group because we don't have thousands of viewers like some of the other channels, but we have a core of intelligent, introspective people, each bringing something different to the table that helps our collective understanding. As the whirlwind tries to suck me in, I hang on to them, and they keep me somewhat sane. The witnesses, the victim's family, they got sucked into this whirlwind because they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And they've been stuck in this.
How did the victim's family get sucked in? Because they were the wrong place at the wrong time. The victim's family, I wouldn't say got sucked in because they were at the wrong place at the wrong time. John O'Keefe was purposely hit by Karen Reed with her large SUV, and she clipped him, and she left him to die. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time. He's right about the witnesses. They happened to be bystanders and witnesses in a murder case, but none of us made the decision. None of those people made the decision besides Karen Reed to end John O'Keefe's life or to mortally wound him. She had to know by clipping him with her SUV that she was either injuring him seriously or killing him, or injuring him seriously and killing him by leaving him unattended in a nor'easter to die. She knew he was dead before anyone else. Isn't that strange?
Center of it. It's hard to breathe in the center of a storm like that. It will take them great strength just to survive. But they will, because they have each other. So the book is not an anti-Karen Reed book. From this point in time at the center of the storm, we can't actually even really understand Karen very well. That will be done at some point in the future by smarter people. Some distance is needed, though. I think time gives us that. I think even she needs it to understand herself.
Wait, Karen Reed doesn't understand herself? Karen Reed needs time to understand herself. We can't understand Karen Reed from all her interviews and all the evidence in this case, all the text messages and phone calls, interviews she's done. We can't understand that she's a psychopathic narcissist, or, I mean, that's a redundancy, because all psychopaths are also narcissists, who was in the discard, who had been abusing John O'Keefe until she finally discarded him. First, she love bombed him. Then, when he was no longer useful, and when he finally ended it, she had started to devalue and discard him. And the final discard was to end his life, because she had to teach him a lesson. How dare he break up with her? He had to be punished for injuring her, causing narcissistic wounds to her narcissism. It seems pretty obvious to me. I don't think I need time or distance to understand that.
The book does not discuss intent. Before one gets to intent, the question of whether or not Karen actually struck John has to first be settled. This was what the jury got stuck on. And they couldn't really address intent until they settled that question. The prosecution presented a very flawed case. Look, there was an enormous amount of...
I wouldn't say they presented a flawed case. I mean, I have some problems with the presentation, but I would say the issue was that we had turtle riders, free Karen readers on the jury, and had it been an unbiased jury, I feel we would have gotten a conviction. But it's hard to know, right? Hard to know either way. Everything that we have gotten from the jury has really come via Aidan Carney. So anyone who's going to talk to Aidan Carney has to be sympathetic to him. No? I mean, they know what the audience is looking for, the Aidan Carney audience.
Evidence to manage, a large number of witnesses. My sympathy. Nonetheless, some of the mistakes were fundamental and based on bad decisions. John's injuries are somewhat odd for hit and run. The attempt to explain them by the prosecution was impotent, unconvincing. But the defense made its own fundamental strategic blunders. Man, there's irony in that, right? None of these...
Right, but now we have a new interview from the jury that says that everything was unconvincing. It was all unconvincing. Found everything that the defense put out was unconvincing. Lucky Lochran was unconvincing. Marie Russell was unconvincing. Arca didn't do it for them. So then what was the holdup? I mean, this juror contradicts himself, gets caught in caught in lies, and one line corrects himself. I mean, it's a crazy interview. Talk about it tomorrow. I don't think it should be taken, though, as meaningfully as a representation of what happened in the jury room. I don't believe him. I'm sorry that he couldn't figure out the jury verdict, and they just were so sloppy after spending 8 or 9 weeks in a courtroom. They were like, we don't want to ask how to fill out this jury form correctly, because I was just a juror just last year on a criminal case. And you take it very seriously. It's a huge responsibility. You have someone's future in your hands.
Lawyers on either side are idiots. They're all talented people. Adam Lally is a capable man. I mean, he just mastered digital forensics just for this case. His sidekick, McLaughlin, writes brilliant motions with a literary flair. David Yannetti was an elite student his whole life and jumped right into the Suffolk County Prosecution's office right out of law school. He's done famous cases, both as a prosecutor and as a defense lawyer. Alan Jackson, I mean, he's as close to a movie star performer in court as we've seen since Johnny Cochran. These lawyers are all somewhere between very good and the very best.
Well, I would say that if they were such good lawyers, then why do they have to go beyond the rules of their profession and go into fraud to win their case? Why do they need an innocence fraud campaign? Why are they helping Karen Reed, according to the evidence in Aidan Carney's case, with the witness harassment case? If they're such good lawyers, they would win their case in the courtroom, not in the court of public opinion. Instead, they're allowing their client to give interview after interview, contradict herself, and all those interviews this time are coming in. But I think Hank Brennan's going to make a huge mistake if he doesn't address Karen Reed's behavior.
Yet, they all fucked up. Excuse my language. It's like watching a Super Bowl where both teams are great, but they have the worst game of their lives. No one deserved to win. The prosecution mistakenly thought that 12 people would hear, I hit him, and send Karen to prison for 20 years. It was not a confession. If it was, we wouldn't be having a trial. The prosecution thinks Karen...
I hit him. Was it a confession? Really? I would say it was exactly a confession. But you can't convict just on a confession alone. You have to have other evidence. This is why when someone comes in and confesses, the police officers don't say, thanks, we got it, the confession's enough. They go out and check it out to make sure it's not, say, an attention-seeking crazy person who wants to take credit for a crime. It was a very important piece of the evidence. And I think it was very effective to have all of the first responders testify first. Manny says, like most cults, the Free Karen Reed movement might back off if they are allowed to do so without reprisals. You think? I don't know what they would do with themselves. I think a lot of people pick these sides of a true crime case just eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Like, what's going to be the most fun? Who do they want to root for? It's almost like they're rooting for a sports team. Who do they want to root for? I find it a little disturbing, frankly. Like, I'll go on the defense side this time and I'll go on the prosecution side. There was a friend of mine was talking to a podcaster who was trying to figure out before he talked about Karen Reed which side of the fence that his audience liked so he could bring in the most money. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know if there's that many people. I think a lot of people like the community, the Free Karen Reed community, like feeling part of something, and something because they pick a new killer every 2 minutes, something exciting is always happening. And I think ultimately it will be the winning side, at least the way we're going now. So I will not be surprised if we get an acquittal or a hung jury. That seems like the way we're going. Manny says again, haha, you're right. Go Jets. Funny.
Took actions early that day before John was found to cover up the crime. Well, if she was trying to cover up the crime, why was she at the same time confessing? Doesn't make sense. Now, people smarter and more experienced than me say that in the stress of that moment, the truth can come out. I believe them. That could be what happened. But that's not the question the prosecution needed to ask. The question is whether 12 people will unanimously agree that she was confessing. All 12 have to see it that way. Not one person was going to...
Well, why didn't they just stop? Why did they present 8 weeks of evidence if all their case was the confession? Seems like there was a lot of other witnesses and a lot of other evidence.
Be troubled by the discrepancy of her supposedly trying to cover things up while at the same time confessing? Not one juror was going to ask if she was just confused? If she was asking whether she hit him? If the first responders understood, maybe they misunderstood what she said, or were they unintentionally influenced later on at the station? Honestly, it was especially...
Yeah, but the problem with that is if you say, could I hit him? You're putting it as a reasonable person who looked at Karen Reed smashed to smithereens taillight could infer that she did hit him by asking, could I hit him? You don't ask questions that are out of the realm of reality. So I don't ask, was I on planet Mars last night? Because I know I wasn't. It's not possible for me to be on planet Mars. I don't ask myself, did I hit John O'Keefe? Because I know wasn't in that area on the late hours of early morning hours of January 28, 29, 2022. So Karen Reed saying a reasonable person could infer, and of course she was admitting to it. She admitted to it, then she backtracked, then she blamed other people, just mixing it up, throwing other people in the mix, deflecting blame, adding more characters to create chaos. And it seems to have worked, and it might work. She feels she's the smartest one in the room.
Unfair what the prosecution did to those first responders, because the prosecution didn't put enough effort into proving their case by the physical evidence. They put the whole weight on those first responders, or a lot of it, and that pisses me off, to be honest. So these people, these witnesses, first responders, they live under siege now in a fire station fortress because the prosecution couldn't put together their case in a convincing way without relying on I hit him. The prosecution spent one damn day preparing with their most important witness, the trooper, who would present the accident reconstruction theory to the jury. That they expected 12 people to send someone away for 20 years on that presentation that we saw last May is beyond me. Now, like I said, maybe I should shut up and say nothing. But I said this the day the prosecution rested. You can go back and see the tape. I said the prosecution would not win. Then I said it later that night on court TV. And for months before, I said almost the same thing, or very similar. I said, if there's no smoking gun in the voicemails, and none of us knew what was in those until the crime, and there was no smoking gun in them, then the state has to prove their case with the hard evidence. That evidence was there, but presented in a way that it would be a miracle if even one juror understood it, let alone 12. The most crucial evidence was the correlation between the vehicle data and John's phone data, but no single witness put that together for the jury. But on the other hand, there was no acquittal.
I would argue that in concert with Karen Reed's behavior that day, the morning of, and all the evidence, the physical evidence, but my impression of listening to Kevin is that he doesn't acknowledge that testimony is evidence, and that when someone's giving testimony under oath, it is evidence. He prefers physical evidence, and there may be jurors who prefer physical evidence. There's both. But there was certainly a lot of testimony about her behavior. But it also wasn't helped by people like Michael Camerano, who I think knew a whole lot more about John O'Keefe's complaints about Karen not saying anything on the stand. He says to I think it's the grand jury, that Karen Reed was annoyed that John O'Keefe was annoyed that Karen Reed didn't ask him to help her with her plumbing issue, and that she was having Richie the plumber deal with it. But on the stand, he says nothing about it. And that's the last argument they had. At least on text message, they're going back and forth about the plumber. She can't come out because she's waiting for the plumber. We heard nothing about the plumber. Is the plumber coming in this time? That's my question.
Either, right? Apparently 9 jurors voted guilty on manslaughter, despite that flawed prosecution. That can only mean this. The defense also blundered. How? In order to get on a jury, you generally have to be respectable. You're likely to have no criminal history. You probably have a stable life, a steady place to live, a job. So you're more likely to have some faith in the system, the courts, law enforcement, first responders. A jury is more likely to see these people as, like them, stable, rooted, law-abiding. But the defense went after these people like they were murderers, gangsters, schemers. That had to piss off a lot of that jury. I recently watched Katie McGaughlin's testimony again. The defense tried to portray her as being part of a murder cover-up.
We don't know. So Forensic RN is asking, was there even a plumber? I forget. We don't know. Karen Reed says there was, and he went to Home Depot to get a part, and he'd be back mañana. Her words. But we heard a lot from Richie the plumber. About Richie the plumber, but we heard nothing in trial about Richie the plumber. A lot in the text messages. They weren't presented as evidence in court. Why not? Why wasn't Richie the plumber, if he existed, a witness? And if he didn't exist, why wasn't it brought up? It was very effective to have a campaign that went after everyone, went after witnesses, because it shut up all the witnesses. So it seemed like they were answering the questions that Adam Lally asked them, but they were also speaking to the free Karen readers out there. Don't attack me. I liked Karen. Everyone loved Karen. No one saw any problems with their relationship ever. No one said, I like Karen, but after she killed my brother, I had to look at her a little differently. I didn't know this Karen that would kill my brother and leave these messages that he's a pervert and F you. I didn't know this Karen. We never heard that testimony. Why not? my argument would be that they were all intimidated. All we heard is, I really liked her. I don't want to be here. That's what it sounded like. I'm sorry I'm here as a witness. Let me just say the few things that I've said before, and please don't attack me. Especially Alan Jackson, who's known for a very aggressive cross.
But her testimony was really credible. It was detailed. The little things that she added in, it was very credible. She wasn't making it up. How does the defense think that the jury reacted to her, that woman being portrayed as though she was connected to some crime family? What about Allie McCabe? She would have seemed to those jurors like their daughter, or at least the daughter they wished they had. She's a clean-cut high school kid, giving people rides on a Friday night, rescuing a stray dog before the storm. The defense tried to suggest she was part of some murder conspiracy. Maybe running, calling around, helping him clean up and hide, faking screenshots of text messages, lying to police, lying to grand juries, lying to them on the jury. Most decent human beings were infuriated at how she was treated on the stand. How do you think the jury felt? They were in the room with her, just sitting feet away. No, I think Karen should not pay her legal bills, to be honest. She got ripped off. She got really ripped off. That defense failed her. The defense team bombed worse than the Chiefs did.
Wait, I thought they were the greatest team of lawyers ever. Didn't he just say they were the greatest team of lawyers ever? How did the greatest team of lawyers mess up in such a high-profile case? Now we have the O.J. Simpson 2.0 for Karen Reed. She has the dream team of innocence fraudster lawyers by her side. She's got Robert Alessi. She's got the other one, I'm forgetting his name. Weinstein. Is that his name? Weinstein. And she's got Bettero coming on the team. She's got a whole team of innocence fraudster lawyers ready to defend her.
This past weekend. In the Super Bowl, Kansas City had invested enormous resources in their offensive line. And they have one of the best in the league and maybe in history. Yet Mahomes got crushed, sacked many times. What happened? Bad game plan. Sound familiar? They thought Philly was going to blitz, which is when you bring in an extra guy to go after the quarterback. And the plan for Kansas City was to just find the open man. Because when you blitz, usually there's a guy open. But Philly didn't blitz. They did something risky this week.
So I really didn't realize that. See, it's like a sports event. It's now a sports event. And I think a lot of people in the true crime community view this murder entertainment sports event. I like this team this time. I like that team this time. Meanwhile, the victim's family gets robbed from any sort of justice. I don't think there is closure. They've been sentenced to a life sentence of grief. That's never going to change. But any kind of small feeling that they've been given a little justice has been robbed from them.
Spread out their 4 defensive linemen in an unusually wide formation. That makes them really hard to block when the quarterback drops back to pass. But it left them open to the run because they're spread out. So now you got these huge holes on the line. So that was a gamble, but that was the strategy they chose. But Kansas City didn't come at them with a game plan based on running. So that's how they screwed it. And so literally that game was lost in the practice week, in the game plans when that was decided. Andy Reid, one of the greatest coaches of all time, maybe the greatest coach of all time, he came up with the wrong game plan. You know, if those two teams were to play again next week, each team would have a completely different game plan. And the result could be very different. I mean, the game certainly would play out different, whatever the end result. Karen Reed's defense team likely believed the prosecution would bring a powerful case with the physical and the data evidence. So they decided to try to destroy the witnesses and convince the jury there was a wild conspiracy to frame her. Maybe they felt they had to do that because they've been telling the public this narrative for a year.
They had no other way to go. Karen, someone else had to do it. If you listen to my interview with criminal defense attorney, the other day about Karen Reed, you know, he said it's some other guy did it. We call it the some other guy did it defense. And that's what it was for Karen Reed. Some other guy did it. That's all they had. And they're still going that way. That's all they have. I'd be curious to ask Kevin which direction he thinks they could go. You know, if you haven't listened to my interview with David Mackenzie, I really encourage you to do it. He's calling it, some other guy did it, defense. But I'd be curious to ask Kevin which direction he thinks the defense should have gone to win their case. Since apparently this is the same tone he's taking in his book, because it's not an anti-Karen Reed book. It's a very neutral book because he wants the whole audience to buy it, right?
I don't know. Maybe it's something simpler. At the bar I used to own, we had a back room with a small stage for bands. The problem is that when a band plays in a small room, each musician tries to compete with the others to be heard. So what happened, like for instance, the guitarist tries to compete with the drummer. And then the drummer takes it up a notch to overcome that. Next thing you know, the music in the room is too loud. Nobody really wants to be in it. Let me give you another example. I used to go out with a girl who went into federal law enforcement. Now, not long after her class graduated from the academy down in Georgia, they were up in Worcester for some event outside a downtown club. As they were leaving, someone maybe gave one of the group some trouble. But all these people had just spent weeks learning special skills that would be useful in a fight. And when you have those skills, it's natural to want to use them. So that actually makes a fight more probable. Alan Jackson is one of the best cross-examiners there is. This guy is Tom Cruise from A Few Good Men. The problem for him now is he has to continue.
I just have to laugh. Every analogy he makes is practically a movie analogy or a sports analogy, usually a movie analogy with Kevin. I mean, I don't think Alan Jackson, I think he's an innocence fraudster lawyer who's aggressive, but a really skilled lawyer doesn't have to get that aggressive on the stand unless they have to. So, of course, he's going to be reminded of A Few Good Men, because that's a very aggressive cross. Adversarial, emotional cross. It doesn't mean it's a great cross, a dramatic cross.
That urge to use that skill when it doesn't make sense to use it. You try to make Jen McCabe look like an arch criminal in the stand. How does that really come across to a jury? I know it comes across with the mob that's watching this. They don't count in the trial. This whole thing that they're trying to sell with this PR campaign that's been going on for the year and a half and convince the public about this conspiracy theory, that's in the hopes that one or two people that are affected by that slip onto the jury. And that did happen in the last jury. The dismissed juror was going around during the trial getting drunk and going in bars and saying, I'm a turtle rider and I'm going to acquit Karen. She should not have been on that jury. So the defense campaign succeeded in getting someone like that on the jury. She was obviously willing to lie to get onto that jury, and she was willing to raise her hand every morning when the judge says, did you see any news accounts on this? I guarantee she lied every morning. She must have been following the case closely with Turtle Boy the whole time. And then one of the jurors that got selected as an alternate showed up the next day in court crying, wearing pink. So she was probably a turtle rider too, or at least a free Karen Reed person. So Jen McCabe is a soccer mom.
There's a good point he brings up. How many turtle riders were on this jury? I think that's really, before we start taking apart the defense case and the Commonwealth's case, how many turtle riders were on the jury? Because has anybody had interaction with a free Karen reader? If there was a video, ring camera video, or any other kind of video of Karen Reed doing this, the free Karen readers would say, oh no, that video was faked. It was made, right? It was, remember when we had the video of Alan Jackson canoodling with Karen Reed? It was all faked because no one likes Karen Reed. She's been framed by everyone, even people in the bushes taking videos or non-videos of her and Alan Jackson. There is no evidence you could show. This goes back to Manny's comment about cults and why it's often been compared to a cult. The free Karen Readers will hold on to Karen Reed's innocence at all costs. Because it's exciting for them. They like that to be on the side, the free Karen Reed side. And right now it looks like it's the winning side. Karen Reed has been one step ahead. At least that's where we are now. And I don't think it's been helpful to say that, well, it's, I don't think it's helpful to have these ideas out there from even the non-supporters are saying Karen Reed didn't mean to do it. If the Commonwealth felt like that, they would not have charged her with second degree. If this were really an accident. And I'd like to hear more, and I don't really, it's like, have you ever seen, I get these comments on my channel like, she did it. Oh, no. She's innocent. That's it. That's the entire comment. I'm like, well, if you said it, it's not an argument. I mean, that's not even an argument. That's just like,
yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
You know what I mean? What are we doing here? What are we doing here? So it's the same way. It's in the same spirit. We get these comments like she's been overcharged. She didn't mean to do it. She was so drunk. She was putting together the pieces of what happened that night. Even the non-supporters who were writing blogs or Substacks about her. She's putting together the pieces. No, what she was doing was mixing it all up, throwing people she didn't like into the mix, creating plausible deniability. And even the way that she murdered John, she had plausible deniability. She could always say she didn't know it was an accident. That's the way Karen Reed does things. That's why I say it's really important for the Commonwealth to talk about Karen Reed's behavior. Am I going to get through this? Even sped up. Where am I? Halfway through. Let's see if we can power through this.
Jackson tried to portray her as Lex Luthor, a murderer. A murderer accomplished a murder. Someone actively participating in the murder of her friend. The father, well, the acting father.
You don't have to be Lex Luthor to kill. If we've learned anything in these true crime stories, you don't have to be Lex Luthor to kill.
Of her daughter's best friend. Now that's crazy. That's risky. That's a bad idea to do that in front of a jury that's sitting feet away from her. Now, yes, she got angry.
And what I mean by that is that psychopathic killers have all sorts of phony public personas.
Angry. Jen did. Of course she did. She could see through his tricks. She got angry and she stood toe-to-toe with him. But how did the jury perceive that cross-examining by Alan Jackson? Well, I'll tell you how. They put themselves in her shoes and they said this is bullshit. And then, like the band members competing with each other in the small room, David and Eddie tried to do the same thing to Alan. And I forget the order. He might have come before that cross-examining might have come before. I don't remember the order of it, but either way, they're competing with each other to show who can dismantle a witness. So then you got David and Eddie trying to take apart this all-American kid and turn her into a scheming murder accomplice. He had to show that he could outdo Jackson, right? So the defense cost Karen any chance of getting an acquittal because they utterly pissed off a lot of those jurors. I guarantee it. If the defense just focused on establishing that the prosecution didn't prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt, they might have won. They might have gotten an acquittal, but they didn't even come close to that. So in 7 weeks, we're getting a rematch in the Super Bowl.
Well, if that's the case, then they could have spared all those witnesses and just not put on a defense. Which they could have done, just not put on a defense. Is that what you're saying, Kevin? It would have been better to not put on a defense? Or are you saying that the witness harassment campaign, I'm confused. turned off the jury to an acquittal. I think we had people who desperately wanted an acquittal on the jury. And I think they wanted an acquittal before they even got on the jury. That's my feeling.
And the game plans will be a little different, but I don't think dramatically different. The goal of the defense will be to get the jurors to say, but what about as many times as possible? So they're going to throw a lot of stuff out there, like they have been since day one in this case, right? Or since day one, I should say since April 18th, when they first pushed it through third avoid. So they're going to do that again, but I think it's going to be different this time. I don't think they're going to try to destroy witnesses like McLaughlin. That's not, or even the McCabe's. That's not going to look good for the jury. The jury is clearly not buying into the. If the defense, if what they're selling is these people are arch criminals, not just that they were willing to do something like murder, but they're scheming and manipulating crime scenes. Jen McCabe has no criminal history. Does that make sense? No. But if you can just create, but that they will use 227 because you're just trying to create enough random things to get people asking questions.
There's another true crime fallacy that you need a criminal history. So many people who do the most heinous crimes don't have a criminal history. I'm not suggesting that there's just no evidence that they did the crime. It's not that Jen McCabe didn't have a criminal history. There's no evidence she did the crime. I think Kevin and I would agree on that.
Questions about what about? So, but I just don't think they'll attack. I don't think they're going to do that stunt that Alan Jackson did in the last trial where he made Jen McCabe say that, read the document and say that she made the search at 227. That was a stunt. And Alan Jackson may feel slick when he did it, but I don't think that probably had a good effect on the jury. But they will have to say that Karen was framed. They have to. There's no other way. Either Karen was framed or she did it. There's no middle ground. Both sides know it because all the physical evidence of the Lexus was found at the crime scene. So unless that evidence was planted and so much other evidence, like the vehicle data, and John's phone, which shows he never went in the house. So unless they can find a way to convince the jury that all that stuff is rigged and planted, manipulated, manufactured, then Karen did it. There's no middle ground. It's not like somebody else was driving down Fairview and struck John and they just got the wrong car. So I predict.
They just couldn't. They could never develop a third-party culprit. They couldn't do it. And I just think we're going right into an acquittal or a hung jury, acquittal or a hung jury. And I don't think the Commonwealth will retry. I know that I would hope they would, but I don't think they will. I think it's going to be very hard to sell the public that your tax dollars are well spent on a third trial. And then Karen Reed, whatever free Karen Reed all the supporters have spent helping Karen get away with her crime is well spent. The speed's at about 1.3, I think I put it at. Tammie. But I think I'm almost done. Anyway, he's writing a book. Let me see if I can move forward.
In fact, let me ask it right now and see what.
Anyway, he's writing a book that's not a anti-Karen Reed book. And I would say, what's the point? What's the point of that? And I hope they improve the website. John O'Keefe deserves better, and John O'Keefe's family deserves better. And I would encourage us to all be advocates for the O'Keefe family. And if any of the O'Keefe's family or friends want to come on this channel and talk, you always have a platform here. That's what I have for today, guys. Please hit the thumbs up. Leave a comment. It really helps with the algorithm. Also, I get so much out of your comments. Appreciate it. And I'll be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. to talk about the juror. We're going to talk about that juror. We're going to get to it. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for listening.
I hit my boyfriend with my car. It wasn't an accident, but with lying lawyers I'll go far. Lying lawyers and witness harassment, I'll avoid prison. It was snowing. I pushed the pedal down, hit him hard. Now the legal system a clown. But with lying lawyers, I'll go far. Lying lawyers and witness harassment. I'll avoid prison. It was snowing. I pushed the pedal down, hit him hard. Now the legal system, my clown. Innocence fraud campaign to save my skin. Making money, truth is my second victim. Carry, Jen, like John, you were my mark. My innocence fraud campaign is my biggest hit, yeah.